Welcome to Mach 10 Sports. In this November 13th, 2023 episode, we have a fantastic episode for you. Week 11, just a statement Saturday in a way we weren't even thinking about, in my opinion, heading into the weekend. All 7 SEC games, just the games in specifically, all 7 matchups, were decided by double-digit points. We had 7 teams make statements on the field. Jaden Daniels had one of the best performances I've personally ever seen. Texas A&M made a statement on Sunday morning saying they were parting ways with Jimbo Fisher. Then this morning, on November 13th, Mississippi State, which we've all kind of got hints that was probably going to happen, decided, you know what? We're going to fire Zach Arnett too. We're going to get in the coaching search world right now, and let's see who we can go get. So we had a lot go on. We had 7 statements on the field, 7 teams just really get after. None of these games were really that close this past weekend. Jaden Daniels making a statement, kind of having his Heisman moment, even though LSU already has 3 losses. But I still think you give it to him. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then you had Sunday morning, Jimbo Fisher being let go by Texas A&M after the big win, 51-10 win over Mississippi State on Saturday night. And then Mississippi State says, hold my beer. We're going to get rid of Zach Arnett. We're going to get in on the party early and often as well from that standpoint. Also, Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports is going to join us to discuss the coaching changes around the league today. I used to work at Texas A&M in Jimbo Fisher's first year and saw firsthand how the organization was run. I'm going to go through it and tell you what went wrong in that era. I mean, there were great people that worked in that building from top to bottom, but I will discuss where the Jimbo Fisher era went wrong, really, just in general. But what a weekend, man. Also, we crowned 2 division winners. We were Alabama, the SEC West representative, Georgia, the SEC East representative. A lot happened on the gridiron this past weekend. And it wasn't really games coming down to the wire. Like I said, all 7 matchups were decided by double-digit points. We had 2 coaching changes. A lot of rumors about Sam Pittman, but it didn't happen. We'll discuss that a little bit. But, man, a lot of fireworks. We know about the SEC championship game. It's official, Alabama, Georgia. But basketball season officially underway as well. I think the SEC has 2 true national title contenders as of this moment. It's early, but it's Tennessee and Arkansas. I think they're both real deal teams. LSU, on the other hand, the opposite end of the spectrum. Just Matt McMahon's second year, you can't be dropping the game to Nickel State on Friday night. We'll have our first SEC basketball power rankings of the season, 1 through 14, as you can probably guess. Arkansas, Tennessee will be the top, and the way I was talking about LSU, they will be at the bottom. And then we'll preview the upcoming week, starting with Kentucky and Kansas' matchup in the Champions Classic on Tuesday night. We got the SEC football power rankings coming out as well. We only got 3 of them left. Felt pretty good with the last 3 of them. Don't feel like you can really argue much with many of those right now. But let's get Ross on. Ross, what up, brother?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
You doing all right, man?
I'm doing all right. Trying to keep up with the crazy world. What's that?
You've been getting that phone charged?
Yeah, man. It is. It's always. I have a little stand here, so I keep it plugged in and sits there and it charges, man. Yeah, these days, never can have too much charge.
Well, brother, let's get right into it. But so initially, what were your thoughts? Did you anticipate this many openings in the SEC this upcoming season? I was on a show, I think, and I asked somebody this was going into the season, Ross, in August, over under SEC coaches or jobs that are open in the SEC after. I put it at 1.5. And it kind of felt like, you told me if I'm wrong, there were a lot of new coaches. I mean, one just got rid of, Zach Arnett. But I feel like there was a lot of things would have to happen for it to get over 1.5. And here we are sitting here November 13th, and we already got 2, and we may have some more coming down the pipe. What's your kind of thoughts on that as we head in to the last 2 weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think 1.5 or around 2 was probably what I expected coming into the season. I think maybe the hottest seats were at Missouri, actually, with Eli Drinkwitz, and then Jimbo Fisher at A&M, I think. And those were kind of the 2 you looked at. And then, of course, Eli's, they're doing great things at Missouri, and obviously he's going to be sticking around. And then the Jimbo situation wasn't unexpected. I think a lot of folks got really uh, didn't think that it would happen because of the dollar figure, but um, it was made pretty clear to me, I think, months ago that the dollar figure wasn't going to impact things there. The Arnett situation it wasn't shocking, but it was a little surprising. I remember making calls in July into August, as I do every year to kind of gauge the seat, everybody's seat, so to speak, in the coaching ranks. And surprisingly, talking to several people, um, that Mississippi State job came up, and so so I think it had been, at least within kind of the industry, it had been known that that job could open. I don't think that a lot of people thought Mississippi State would struggle quite as much as they are to see that job open, but they have, and yeah, so we're sitting at two, and 2 more weeks left in the season.
So let's go back to the A&M one real fast before we move on to Mississippi State. And we'll talk about some upcoming ones. And again, appreciate you joining us. Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports, senior college football analyst, guy breaks news. I feel like you're breaking news every day, dude. I don't know how the phone doesn't explode. But just your thoughts on the A&M job. I feel like from the coaching world standpoint, it's a gravy train where I think some people, just some casual fans on the outside, just think, oh, well, they've never won there, so they're never going to win before. What's kind of your thoughts on that? Some potential candidates, and who do you think they ultimately kind of circle the wagons around?
I mean, I think it's a pretty dang good job, right? It's one of the most well-resourced programs in the country. I was looking back at some figures that A&M had reported as far as donations, and I mean, they average like 60, 70 million annually in just donations to the athletic department. So it just they just sort of, to use the cliche, print money there. And the fact that they are paying $76 million for a coach to go away and not coach says a lot about how much they have resource wise. We know about their NIL situation, how they were kind of got ahead of everybody when it came to NIL. They're in a incredibly talented state, which produces great high school football players, college football players. Love football in the state. I mean, the facilities are incredible. It's one thing after another. The only negative about the job, aside from the expectations, obviously, is um, is they haven't done it recently,
Yeah.
right? They haven't gotten over that hill, so to speak. So I think that's what you alluded to there, or like about how well, can you do it there? Because nobody has done it, at least in the modern era, and done it, meaning, it at least play in the national championship game or make the playoffs, and that hasn't happened, or honestly win a conference championship. That hasn't happened in a while either there.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's a good job, a great job. I do, because of all those other things I mentioned. As far as like who they go after, I think any high level, top paid Power Five coach is somebody they'd be interested in. I think there are some that make a lot of sense in the names you kind of hear out of College Station, uh, like uh, like Dan Lanning at Oregon, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, Mike Norvell at Florida State, uh, Elko, who's at Duke, was there at A&M at a time. I think there's some support for Jeff Traylor at UTSA. He's done a great job at UTSA. That's a big jump, but I think you have some supporters there for him. So it's so early in the search. Who knows? A couple of those guys I just named have really big buyouts. Uh, Dan Lanning and Lane have buyouts that are pretty significant. I think Lanning's is pretty publicly known, around $20 million. Lane's isn't publicly known, but it's pretty steep. I think it's probably, close to half of his compensation, that, his um, contract, basically,
Yeah.
roughly. So it's a lot of money at 15, maybe $20 million. So And then there's a couple people on that list, including Lanning in Norvell, who could be playing through December. So, how late do you wait to hire a coach?
No, I mean, you're right. You had Oregon who can make the playoffs. Who Dan Lanning, obviously at Florida State, still sitting there undefeated. They could easily be rolling into the playoffs. And then I kind of was going to – this is one of my questions too, but I was going to lead into it. You brought up a little bit. Does it feel like these administrators, these athletics departments, board of regents, board of trustees, whoever's making these decisions, is it kind of – we're making decisions earlier now, like much earlier than even when I worked in college football a year and a half ago. I feel like it's the portal window. You just got to get started earlier. So, again, retention. You're not losing your roster. You feel like A&M kind of was like, hey, let's get in early, or is it kind of they would always been the big dog no matter when that job came open? And I feel like Mississippi State just followed suit from that standpoint.
Yeah, a lot of times with these situations, it is kind of like a domino type of situation where when you have one kind of fall, then all the other ones who are on the cusp of falling go ahead and do it and make the move. Because you want to get into the race, so to speak, the carousel race. And I think that's probably partly what happened with some of the others after A&M, maybe, the Mississippi State, and then you had Boise, make their move. They may have been planning to do that, but A&M, it kind of starts like a spark a little bit. You saw what happened at San Diego State. Brady Hoke decided he's going to retire. I'm sure that wasn't a completely voluntary retirement, but so you start seeing those things kind of it's kind of a ripple effect when one does it. As far as why A&M did at the time they did, I think there's probably a few reasons. And this happens. It's kind of hard to believe, but it does happen. And I don't know for sure if this is why they did it, but it's certainly why mid-season firings sometimes do happen, and that's because if you're going to fire a coach and you made the decision to do it because he could win out.
Yeah.
Then
it could be the Les Miles effect.
Difficult. That's exactly right. LSU and Les Miles specifically in 2015, right? They waited. Les Miles got carried off the field in the last game of the regular season. I think the decision had basically been made to fire him. And they reversed course that day. So yeah, you could have a situation like that. I think when Ed Orgeron was fired in 2021, going back, that one just coincidentally another LSU one, but A&M's firing of Jimbo Fisher to me is very comparable to 2021 firing of Ed Orgeron, because the decision was made days before the firing and even before a game. In A&M, of course, the decision with A&M was made on Thursday, really, and the executive board of A&M made it. They kept it quiet. Jimbo coached the game, won the game, and then was fired on Sunday. Ed Orgeron back in 2021 talks with his agent, I think, started that Monday until all week. There were negotiations, and then he coached the game. LSU played Florida, won the game, and then that Sunday was fired. So those two things are kind of comparable there. But that's number one, that you don't want to see. If you made a decision and want to fire a coach, do it now before he maybe wins out. The other reason is to get a head start in the search and all that stuff. I think getting a head start on it is big. And then in the number three probably is a recruiting thing. It's probably to show recruits, hey, we're moving forward. We're going to have it going in a different direction. Prepare yourselves, sort of thing.
Ross, we got a couple of questions here. People wanted me to ask you. First, Myron Cummings asking if Dan Lanning, you talked about it a little bit, the coaching carousel here, with A&M opening up, if Dan Lanning goes to Texas A&M, how serious could Lane to Oregon be, in your opinion?
Didn't expect that one. There's a lot of debates over what job's better than the other. I would imagine people would probably say that the Ole Miss job is better than the Oregon job on various fronts, especially now, because Oregon's going to the Big Ten. So it just makes that job a lot more difficult. So that would be a surprise.
Yeah.
if Lane were to leave for that job.
And then the last question we got here, I got it texted into me, Ross. Told we'd ask, when can, this is a little more off topic I got one more question for you before we get you out of here. But when can we expect any new NCAA, SEC, or governmental regulations on NIL? This is some number, it's text.
Well, the NCAA every few months, releases some new guidelines, so they could continuously do that randomly, I guess, whenever they want, whenever they get together. I guess the latest thing is you'll see it. I think it came out a few weeks ago. They announced it, and it'll be approved in January at the NCAA convention. And that is 3 changes. I believe it's 3 changes to the NIL policy. They're going to add like a database where an athlete discloses his NIL deal to a school. The school will kind of like upload it into a database, and it's supposed to be for public consumption. And the second change is I believe they're having some kind of agent registry, NIL agent registry, where agents have to register and all that stuff. And there was a third one that I am forgetting right now that the NCAA, all of this is, I'm going to try to use my words carefully. All of this relies on athletes to disclose their deals, for one, and agents to come forward and register, because they really don't have to. They're not required to.
Yeah.
Athletes really aren't required to disclose either. So all of this, I don't know if it really changes much.
Ross, appreciate you answering that for the listener. And then finally, just 2 quick questions. We'll get you out of here again. Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports does a phenomenal job following the sport. I would give him a follow if you don't. If you aren't, I don't know what you are doing. But Zach Arnett let go at Mississippi State. Fair, not fair, didn't get a full first season. I've seen different takes. I've seen people on both sides of the fences here. What's kind of your feel? I mean, you're from the state of Mississippi, Ross. You've been to Starkville numerous times. What is kind of the feel, in your opinion, here? Fair, not fair? Zach Selman trying to get his own guy here?
Well, yeah, I think it's a lot of different things. He was really put in a tough spot, Zach. And, I guess we shouldn't have too much sympathy for him, right? He's going to get paid $4.5 million to not coach.
And he could have a DC job wherever he wanted tomorrow.
Yeah, he could. And that buyout's mitigated too with whatever he makes. So that, in the end, Mississippi State might spend $1 million or so, maybe firing him. So, but he was kind of put in a really tough position, right? Like, the sudden passing of Mike Leach. There was, I think, the signing day was creeping up on them, was just a few days away. So they kind of made this move to kind of hold things together, sort of like, I mean, I think he was 36 when he got the job, youngest coach in the SEC, and then second youngest coach ever hired, I think, in the SEC, going back like 35, 40 years. So it's pretty tough. It's a tough job in the first place, right? It's arguably the second hardest job in the league. Yeah. And then you're 36, get thrust into it after the coach suddenly dies. There's a lot going on there. And then, one of the first decisions he made was pretty much overhaul completely the offense, which, Mike Leach's air raid offense, and it just never really worked. And then, of course, as you mentioned, right, Zach Selman, the new AD there, came in, a few weeks after Arnett was hired. So, in a lot of ways, just a hard, in a way, an unfair spot that he was kind of put in, but he was paid handsomely for it. And maybe he made some wrong decisions along the way. But I think it's fair to say that maybe it was a little unfair to only give somebody 10 games. I mean, that's 11 games if you count the bowl last year, but that's tough.
No, that's tough. Well, before we get you out of here, last question. Do you anticipate, or are we going to see any more openings here? I mean, I guess you got a couple, maybe if Stoops were to leave to go, maybe to replace Kirk Ferentz if he retires at Iowa, Kentucky would come open. Does Arkansas do anything with Sam Pittman? Those are just 2 of the guys that jump out to me. maybe something happens. Elijah Drinkwitz goes elsewhere. I don't know. That's a third one, maybe, if he were to vacate that position. But anything to any of those three?
Yeah, in the SEC, the Arkansas one certainly has had a good amount of buzz around it. I get a sense that Hunter Yurchik, the athletic director at Arkansas, doesn't want him to make some kind of move on Sam Pittman. I think they have a good relationship. I think Pittman's done pretty well there. They've been happy with him. This year has been rough. You have to say during that 6-game losing streak, though, sure there were a couple blowouts, but there were also like 2 or 3 really tight games where they played really well in those games. I think they played Alabama really, really well, as I recall.
LSU in the last second field
A&M
goal.
well, LSU well, yeah.
They were up. I think they were up in Oxford with 8 minutes left.
Yeah. So they are really close. And I think his firing of the offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, probably was a sign that he knows he needs to change things on the offensive side of the ball. And I would imagine they're going to give him that opportunity to do that for at least another year.
Perfect, man. Well, Ross, I appreciate you joining us again. Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports, senior college football analyst, does a phenomenal job. I appreciate you coming on today, talking these updated coaching hires, coaching firings in the SEC right off the bat, right off this episode. Ross, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I know it's a busy time for you.
No problem, Dave. Thanks for having me.
See you, buddy. Ross Dellenger again, guys, lead college football analyst, senior college football analyst for Yahoo Sports. Used to work for SI, Sports Illustrated. Does a phenomenal job covering the sport of college football. You heard him, just a lot of different reasons overall. Texas A&M, do they go empty out the checkbook again for the Dan Lanning, the $20 million buyout he has at Oregon? I've heard Billy Lucci on TexAg say, hey, I don't necessarily think A&M is going to go write a blank check for anybody. They may go get somebody under the radar you're not even thinking about. Random people are going to hit up their agents, are going to hit up at A&M. Some candidates are going to be interested in the job that nobody's even talking about. He mentioned potentially maybe even like a Chip Kelly over at UCLA. So keep those names in the back of your mind too. For Mississippi State, I think it's just an unfortunate situation for Zach Arnett. That's my kind of 2 cents on it. He's put in a tough situation. They've gotten worse. You had a lot of veteran guys back. The big thing is changing the offense, bringing the offensive coordinator in, Kevin Barbay from App State. Things hadn't gone well. Obviously, you lost Will Rogers, your starting quarterback, for a couple of weeks. Your other best player, Woody Marks, at the running back position, has been out for significant weeks. It's just the worst combination, the perfect storm in a negative way, where Zach Selman, the new AD coming over from Oklahoma, wants to make his own hire. Zach Arnett was hired before he got there. It was what it was. They leased him out for a year. They're moving in a different direction. I've always said, once you think you need to get rid of your head coach, you probably need to do it. I mean, think about it in the history of time. Has anyone ever came back from me like, yeah, he was on the hot seat, but man, he turned it around. Now they have a statue of the guy outside the stadium. Gus Malzahn was on the hot seat for 3 or 4 years at Auburn and finally caught up to him. Les Miles, 3 to 4 years at LSU, it caught up to him. Tom Herman, it caught up to him. Jimbo Fisher, caught up to him. It always catches up to him, and they ultimately end up getting fired. Now, is it always for the best? To be determined, to each his own. We could talk about that. But, again, glad Ross joined us. Had some great points overall for us here. But let's get right to it. Around the SEC, wanted to bring up the Week 13 TV schedule for you before we start talking about my time here at Texas A&M and why I think the Jimbo Fisher experiment did not end up working out. But this is the November 23rd through 25th. Remember, you have the Egg Bowl, Mississippi State, Ole Miss on Thursday night of Thanksgiving. So this is the last week of the season here. This is a rivalry week. That Thursday night, Ole Miss at Mississippi State as normal, 6:30 Central Standard Time zone on ESPN. On Friday, Missouri heads to Arkansas for a 3 p.m. Central Standard Time zone kick on CBS. The last CBS SEC, that'd be the Auburn game. But then on Saturday, Texas A&M at LSU. It's a weird game to be at 11 a.m. It feels like a night game. It's a weird game that's at 11 a.m. Elijah Robinson, first road game is the interim head coach at Texas A&M. Will do a phenomenal job. Alabama Auburn, the 2:30 p.m. CBS game. Vanderbilt at Tennessee, the 2:30 SEC Network game. Florida State at Florida will be the 6 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone ESPN game. Georgia at Georgia Tech, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on ABC. Clemson at South Carolina, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone on SEC Network. And then Kentucky at Louisville, to be announced, to be determined, says, but that is rivalry week slate, the November 23rd through 25th slate in the SEC. But let's get right to it. Jimbo Fisher fired, as we know. Just preface it. I worked at Texas A&M for 2 years, 2017 and 2018. So I saw the end of I didn't even sign a class with Kevin Sumlin. Saw the end of the Kevin Sumlin era, and then was there with Jimbo Fisher for that first year. Just wanted to kind of walk you through the halls there of the Bright Complex, the Texas A&M football building, and kind of give you my thoughts on why it didn't work overall. But let's get it started. Jimbo Fisher, 45-25 overall, 27-21 in the SEC. He's going to get his full $77.5 million contract, man. I should have kept talking to Jimbo, man. Oh, Uncle Jimbo, man, if you could write me a check right now, I'm telling you, man, $77.5 million. I mean, today is Jimbo Fisher Day. I heard Neil McCready on Siskey McCready talk about it today. I mean, what does Jimbo Fisher do today? He's just, every time I see that number, I think about that. He's going to get the $19.3 million over the next 60 days. That's 25% of his contract. He will get 8 annual installments through 2031. So yearly until the year of 2031, he's going to have $7.2 million a year coming in until 2031. That's unbelievable. Now, enough with the numbers, as I'm sure you've heard them. I want to give Texas A&M credit for doing what they felt was right. I talked about it. Once you think he's no longer your guy, you need to move on. Even after the big 51-10 win you had over Mississippi State on Saturday night, they let him go that night. Like I mentioned to you after the Tennessee game, this decision was ultimately made after the Ole Miss game and finalized this past Thursday at the Board of Regents. Jimbo didn't know till Saturday. There was no big rah-rah speech, go win one for the Gipper, his last game, from people I know over there. This kind of took everyone by surprise. But I think the Ole Miss game was the one. After they lost to Tennessee, they had a bye week. South Carolina at home, and at was once he lost the Ole Miss game and 9-3 was out the window. I think it was, and I don't think it really came down to one game again. You should never just judge a guy by one game, but I think that was kind of we're placing the nail in. The kick for Texas A&M is short. Final nail in the coffin. Final nail in the coffin. Just think Ross Bjork made a decision. They're going to run with it. I don't necessarily think they have anyone. People were pushing Dan Lanning. They may go after him. Maybe somebody you're not even thinking about. You maybe, man, they paid that just for that guy. You never know. But let's discuss what went wrong. Like I said, I worked there for 2 years, knew the day-to-day of that operation. Now, these past 6 years, I firstly want to say, we're not terrible. Did they underachieve? Absolutely. But Jimbo Fisher is one of the brighter football minds that I have been around. Do not get that twisted. I sat in about 365 straight staff meetings with this guy. And I can honestly say he was a fantastic football mind. I mean, you ask anybody who worked with him. He was a football encyclopedia. He could pull up stuff going back to his playing days, to his time at LSU, time at Florida State, time with Bobby Bowden as the offensive coordinator at Florida State, his time as the head coach at Florida State. Just a revolving door. It just had so much football knowledge. So I don't just want to bash this guy. And he had some good offensive philosophies. He just didn't evolve. That's what it was. His initial offensive strategy, coaching quarterbacks. I mean, he improved Kellen Mond night and day from when I saw that through that year. A great quarterback developer. He really is. Just kind of had some injury luck with some of these guys, even Haynes King in 21, and obviously Connor Weigman this year. I mean, football encyclopedia, football junkie, knows football like the back of his hand. There's no denying that. But where did it go wrong? I keep getting that question all day. You have to have an organizational plan as a leader of the program the day you step on campus. You have to define roles and responsibilities the moment you hire somebody. I mean, listen to Nick Saban talk about Bill Belichick's strengths. It's not about, man, coach, that Cat Blitz you brought off the edge, man, I'll never forget that. No, you go watch that documentary between those guys. He always talks about, man, I just always loved how you made roles clear and responsible. There's no gray area. I knew what I had to do that day, what I had to do that week, what was expected of me the moment I watched it. That's not the case in most football programs, or even most organizations in general outside of football. That's rare. I think you start to realize that the older you get, you have to have clear, defined non-negotiables in every aspect of your program. Coaching, for example, who do you want to be as a team? What do we want to practice? Are we going to have tackling circuits every week? So we want to be good tackling teams. Are we just going to run a bunch of plays and not develop at the position? I think that's ridiculous. And that's what was happening over there. You have to develop the position group. You can't just go run a bunch of plays, run it once or twice throughout the week, call it on game day. Well, we practiced it on game day. Why did we run the wrong route? Why did we not run the China route or smash route? You can't put that much on. You got to develop them to that specific position. Strength and conditioning. You can't just go off the same strength and conditioning program that Nick Saban has had since he was at LSU with Tommy Moffitt, the fourth quarter program. That's got to evolve. That's got to evolve at some point. You have to evolve in it. You have to listen to your strength coaches. You have to listen to your director of player personnel. You have to listen to your director of football ops. Recruiting. You have to have critical factors that you want at every position. Those are non-negotiables, in my opinion. And it starts at the top of the head coach. It can't be a grab bag type of evaluation process and just going off memory and a Rolodex of former players used to coach. It can't be, okay, I have a feeling this guy reminds me of Dwayne Bowe or Dalvin Cook or Jameis Winston or Early Doucette or Michael Clayton. It can't be that. Matt Flynn, heard that one a lot. Now, like I said, to be fair to Jimbo Fisher, this is rare across college football in my experience. Clear roles and responsibilities are not usually clearly defined. It's welcome in the building. Let's get started. How can you help us recruiting? That's normally it. Strength and conditioning, coaches are kind of set in their ways with that. I thought Texas A&M had a fantastic strength coach when I got there. Brought him over from Oklahoma, Jerry Schmidt. He's back at Oklahoma with Brent Venables, but he left Texas A&M. Texas A&M promoted one of Jimbo's guys. Hired too many loyalists. I think he kind of ran Jerry Schmidt off, if I'm being honest with you. He was one of the best-known strength coaches in the country. I mean, he really was. He was with Bob Stoops for years, with Spurrier when he was at Florida. But again, my point being, a lot of college teams and fans would honestly cringe at how some of their favorite college football programs were run from top to bottom. If we really opened the door and showed you how the sausage was made day in, day out. That's not at a lot of places. It's some places I've worked. You'd be shocked, though. You would be shocked. You can't, but like I said, you can't just hire loyalists to key positions that are just yes guys and are just collecting a paycheck. You need to be open-minded. You need to put the ego away. You got to, times are changing. We get instant information. There's information coming across our face all the time. You got to be willing to adapt because they're changing every day. Every day. And again, I go back to that strength and conditioning coach hire. You hired a great one when you first got there, when you had a chance to go hire another one. It's Texas A&M, man, with a new weight room. You just promote the next guy. Go hire the best guy for the job, not just a guy that you like to talk hunting with or your buddies with. That's fine. Hire the best guy for the job. You're at Texas A&M. I think so. That's some of the stuff that kind of stuck with me. But again, in today's game, I'm going to add this too. You need a GM type role, a general manager type role in this building that your head coach can trust to build the board, manage the roster day to day. The head coach doesn't have time for that with media obligations, meeting with players. I mean, he's the CEO of an organization. I heard Scott Pioli one time say, the former Kansas City Chiefs GM, the higher you get up, the further you get away from doing the stuff you actually loved and why you got into that industry, whatever industry it is. That's the same with college football with a head coach. There's too much going on in recruiting these days for you to make all the evaluations and make the determination of who you're taking. Now, you're the head coach. It's your program. You should obviously have a say in that. But you got to give someone that role. It's, hey, Johnny, what do we think of Dwayne Smith over here? Pop it out. And you got to take that guy's opinion real seriously because he's watched more film than your coaches. I always used to say that. As personnel guys, we watch more film than the coaches. We watch more high school prospect film. We know the board. We're comparing this guy to this guy. We're comparing the second guy to the sixth guy on the board or the seventh guy to the third guy. We just naturally watch more film. That's a fact. Just like I would never go into a coach's office and tell them you need to go run cover 3. I just wouldn't do that. So I think that's where college football has to evolve. That was an issue at Texas A&M. He thought he was the GM end-all be-all. You can't be the play caller. You can't pick the roster. There's not enough time in the day. I mean, you can do it, but you're going to be average. And this is why we're having this conversation. Again, it starts with defining responsibilities, being open-minded to change, even though you might not think it, but you have to trust the people you hire. Strength and conditioning. It's an important hire. One of the more important hires in college football. You got to hire someone that is the best person for the job because they are with your players 90% of the time throughout the year. And then personnel. Like I said, you have to have a guy you trust with evaluations. But at the end of the day, Jimbo's inability to have a real plan for the Texas A&M football program, starting at himself to the lowest of student assistants in the building and not clearly defining those roles ultimately did him in. Those things add up, and those things turn into procedural penalties, delay of games, offsides penalties, and all the other tiny details that get you beat on Saturdays against the Alabamas, Tennessees of the world. It ends up rearing its ugly head in those situations. But where does Texas A&M go from here? I don't think they know right now. I mean, names that jump out, Dan Lanning, Mike Elko, Glenn Schumann, Mike Norvell, the Detroit Lions coach Dan Campbell, who's a Texas A&M guy, Kalen DeBoer. I mean, Jeff Traylor has a ton of Texas connections. Do you go with him? I don't know, but I don't even think Ross Bjork knows at the time, or the Board of Regents. I think they're really putting the feelers out, probably hire a search firm to help them. But now they better figure out quick, because I think they may be surprised to find out more coaches are in this job that are interested in this job than they think. It just all comes down to that specific coach's buyout, who they want to hire. But this is a fantastic job. Don't let anybody fool you, especially in today's college football. It can be a consistent playoff team starting next year when the playoff goes 12 easily. Just remember, though, just because they have not hired the right guy before doesn't mean they won't. Just because Texas A&M has only had one double-digit win season in the past 25 years, only won a couple of conference championships, hadn't won a national championship in a long time, doesn't mean they can't. It's like that Dante Peaks analogy. When Pierce Bronson walked in and was telling everybody, hey, this volcano, it may erupt. And people are like, no, it's never erupted, man. It ain't going to erupt. Just telling you, A&M's a sleeping giant. Just because they haven't hired the right guy the last 4 or 5 times doesn't mean they won't. 2 things can be true at once. Texas A&M has been an underachieving program, but it can also, it has all the resources, all the money it needs to be successful if they get the right guy in there. That's the Dante's Peak analogy. It's going to get you in trouble if you think like that. Truly a sleeping giant. Now, again, I don't want to go over initial candidates any further until a couple more days ago. It's been just over 24 hours. Because all I'd be doing is being speculating, wasting time, and we have a lot of other stuff to go to. But again, I think this is where this stuff went wrong for Jimbo Fisher. Not having a plan when he got there, not being willing to adapt, and not defining roles and responsibilities, starting with himself all the way to the lowest student assistant in that equipment room. But transitioning over, I appreciate you joining us so far. We've had a great start. We've had Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports come over and talk about some of these coaching changes with Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. Will there be any other potential SEC changes? Sam Pittman potentially in Arkansas. Does Mark Stoops here and that could be likely? Maybe he goes to Iowa. Kentucky opens up. It could be John Summerall written all over it. And then Arkansas, do they do anything with Sam Pittman? It sounds like they reached out to Gus Malzahn. His big donor people were pushing his name. Hunter Yurchich, Arkansas AD, you heard Ross talk about. Sounded like he wasn't real interested. Gus wasn't real interested. Hunter Yurchich wasn't real interested. So I think that's why Sam Pittman didn't get fired yesterday, if I'm being honest with you. That's just pure speculation. That's just one man's guess. But moving on, let's get into the Week 11 preview. Again, all 7 of these matchups were decided by double digits, at least double digits. Alabama over Kentucky, 49-21. Alabama clinched the SEC West on Saturday afternoon in pretty dominating fashion. Went up 21-0, and without Kool-Aid McKinstry's fumble and the punt return, probably is up 35-0 at half. I'll be honest with you. Kentucky's probably scoreless at the half. But nonetheless, Alabama completely took over around the middle of the third quarter. Mature performance from the team across the board here. Jalen Milroe, another fantastic day. Could sneak his way into that maybe New York invitation if he plays well at Auburn, has a good SEC championship game where Alabama wins. Maybe he's invited. I don't think he's going to win it. But, 15 for 22, 234 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and you added 3 rushing touchdowns. That's 6 touchdowns for Jalen Milroe. Playing really well these last 2 weeks. The offensive line pretty much controlled the line of scrimmage from the middle of the second quarter on. Thought Amari Niblack, tight end Amari Niblack, had a good game in both the passing game and as an extra defender on the edge at times. An extra blocker on the edge at times. Defense didn't seem to miss a beat without Deontay Lawson and Jalen Key. This was just a bad matchup for Kentucky across the board, like we mentioned on Thursday's show. Fits right into what Alabama wanted to do. Alabama showed some new stuff with their double A-gap blitzes, stunts, confused Kentucky's offensive line. Devin Leary, not mobile enough to improvise. He got out once. But I think that was just an exception, and normally Alabama would be willing to give that up again and make some plays outside the pocket. Alabama should have got off the field even more a couple of times. They had some late personal fouls. It seems like Alabama's getting a personal foul every game now in quarterbacks. But a physical group, running back for Kentucky, I feel sorry for him at times. He couldn't get going. Just the big blue wall could not get it going. But where do we go from here? Alabama 9-1, 7-0, has punched its ticket to Atlanta with games against UT, Chattanooga, and Auburn left before a guaranteed date now. You can mark it on your calendars against Georgia in the SEC championship game in early December. For Kentucky, they're 6-4, 3-4. They've lost 4 of their last 5, but their only win coming against Mississippi State 2 weeks ago. Pretty big one this week for Kentucky in Columbia, South Carolina, against South Carolina before they head to Louisville to close out a season. Louisville, they beat Miami this week, punching their ticket to Charlotte for the ACC championship game. The Cardinals are good this year in Jeff Brom's first year. So 2 big matchups for Kentucky for them to potentially get to 8 wins again. Big one really for in South Carolina this week for both South Carolina and Kentucky. Can the Cats get to 8? That's the big question. I feel like anything less than 8 this year would be disappointing. Louisville's probably better than they expected, but again, man, I think anything under 8, if you go 6-6, lose both these, that'd be tough for Mark Stoops. But again, Alabama getting the 49-21 win over the Kentucky Wildcats. Next matchup, Georgia getting a 52-17 win over Ole Miss. Georgia did whatever they wanted to on offense. It amassed over 600 yards in total, relied heavily on their 2 senior running backs, Kendall Milton looking like Herschel Walker, combination of Herschel Walker and Todd Gurley out there on Saturday, looking unbelievable. It was almost more Ole Miss's defenders were just bouncing off him more so than like he just looked incredible. I mean, he's a little slow. Like, he didn't have a lot of burst acceleration, solid back, real rocked up dude, but it was like men versus boys at times. I mean, Dejon Edwards had a big game, both combined for 186 yards, 21 carries, 4 touchdowns. How about Brock Bowers coming off the ankle surgery, tightrope surgery, playing 45 snaps in the cold, wet environment Saturday at Sanford Stadium? That's not just a total freak show. He's off 26 days, I think, since he had the surgery. Just freak show. I mean, once I calculated in the cold and how wet it was, I was like, man, 45 snaps. I was putting the over-under at 15. Georgia's the offensive line just absolutely abused the Ole Miss front 7. Gave up 0 sacks. Carson Beck probably didn't have to take a shower after the game. 0 tackles for loss. Averaged 10 yards per carry. Only thing I would say Georgia struggled with was Ole Miss's running game on the edges just in the first half. They adjusted at half, but you could tell early in the game they missed inside backer Jamon Dumas Johnson, who's out with a forearm fracture. True freshman C.J. Allen stepped in, Small Munden. They improved in the second half, but the first half left something to be desired. For Ole Miss, I'll give Lane credit. Came in with a great initial game plan, scored touchdowns on 2 of their first 3 drives, came out swinging, but Georgia answered every time. I mean, Ole Miss had little room for error with how well Georgia's offense was operating and the lack of operation from Ole Miss's defense. Again, for Ole Miss, not having Micah Pettis at right tackle, then losing Jaden Williams in the first half was really the nail in the coffin for the offense. You lost 2 starters on the offensive line this week heading into that game for Georgia, or Micah Pettis in practice this past week, and Jaden Williams in the game. Ole Miss had recovered from that. They're thin up front. Just depth took over. I mean, it's cliche, but Georgia had the Jimmies and Joes, man. That was the difference. Ole Miss just doesn't have the depth to overcome that. But in reality, the Ole Miss offense only having 14 yards of total offense in the second quarter was another reason why. Georgia was up 14. Ole Miss got the stop out of the half, had a chance to come back, but the offensive line just couldn't protect after losing 2 starters. The Rebel defense was not going to get enough stops after getting down 2 scores, just putting a lot of pressure on that offense to keep up. Again, 600 total yards Ole Miss allowed 52 points, and let Georgia score on 8 of their 10 drives. Scoring touchdowns on 80% of your drives, you're not going to win games. But where do we go from here for both teams? Georgia, 10-0, still undefeated. They have to be number 1 in the playoff poll tomorrow night, right? Have to jump Ohio State. 7-0 in conference. Big trip to Knoxville this week. Kind of sleepy game. Georgia could be looking ahead a little bit to, I don't know about Georgia Tech, but Alabama's a little too far out. Still 2 weeks to go. Tennessee officially out of the SEC East race. Bad performance against Missouri. We'll get into that one in a bit. What's Georgia's mindset rolling in? They got to get focused. It'll be interesting from that standpoint. The game could be closer than people think. I saw the lines at 10. Then Georgia heads to Atlanta back-to-back weeks, like I mentioned, at Georgia Tech, then against Alabama in the SEC championship game. Ole Miss 8-2, 5-2 with a home game this weekend against ULM, Louisiana Monroe. And then the trip to Starkville on Thanksgiving night. Ole Miss real shot at getting to an Access Bowl. Really battle probably between them and Missouri. I mean, you have 4 SEC teams in real good shape to get into an college football playoff Access Bowl. Obviously, Alabama and Georgia, Ole Miss and Missouri. Ole Miss is going to win out. I mean, they're going to beat ULM. They're going to most likely beat Mississippi State at home unless some miracle happens. But Ole Miss should be able to get to 10 wins, like I said, which puts them in 2 Access Bowls in the last 3 years. That's Ole Miss's ceiling. I mean, Lane Kiffin's doing a phenomenal job here. But again, just Lane Kiffin and the boys did not have the personnel, did not have the Jimmies and Joes to keep up with Georgia in Sanford Stadium on Saturday night. Georgia just a dominating performance when pummeling Ole Miss 52-17. Missouri getting the massive 36-7 win over Tennessee. Again, another double-digit win, another double-digit SEC game. Holy third down, though. Missouri converted 11 of their 16 third down attempts on Saturday afternoon. I don't know whether to be impressed by Missouri's offense or be embarrassed for Tennessee's defense. Probably equally, somewhere in the middle. The Tennessee offensive line and defensive line were complete no-shows in this one. On both sides of the line of scrimmage, this was one of the better rushing teams in the conference and one of the better teams at stopping the run. But again, the pass rush for Tennessee has been non-existent since coming out of halftime against Alabama. It really has. But how about that Missouri offensive line? I'm loving this offensive line, especially guys like Armand Mimbo. Dude. I remember recruiting him out of high school. They played at a high level for back-to-back weeks. They put up over 150 on Georgia on the road last week. And this week they put up over 225. That's back-to-back weeks of 150 yards plus against 2 really good fronts. Very impressive. Cody Schrader, the Missouri game, got going early and often. 255 yards to be exact in total on the ground for Missouri against the second-best run defense in the SEC coming into the game. And then on the flip side, Tyrone Hopper got out. Missouri's D did not stop. They held a good Tennessee running game to under 100 yards total rushing. A critical moment in the game was Tennessee had some momentum in the half. Jalen Wright fumbled right before the half in Missouri's own territory where it looked like Tennessee was at least going to get a Charles Campbell field goal. Missouri picks it up. A couple plays later, they get a field goal. They go up 6. They have all the momentum heading into the second half. I mean, that all happened within 20 seconds. Can't happen. Lost the middle weight. Can't happen. Joe Milton's going to Joe Milton. It's not always really bad, but it's not really ever that good either. Had the pick 6 in the game, but the game was essentially out of reach at that point. But the big one, and this is where the game was over, was the critical fumble where he's pronating, pulling his arm back, and it hits off his running back. It's a fumble. Missouri recovers it. They had to review it. That was the beginning of the end of the game. But Missouri just impressive on both fronts, especially offensive line and Cody Schrader. Tip of the cap to them. Eli Drinkwitz doing a phenomenal job. They're staring at 10-2 in the face. They go, let's get to it right here. Missouri 8-2, 4-2. That's where we're going from here with a home game against Florida this weekend and a trip to Fayetteville next Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving. That's a 10-2 finish to me, in my opinion. I was high on Missouri going to the year. I had 7-8 wins. I didn't see 10-2 with – they easily could have beat LSU. Came to the final – I mean, the final score was by 10, but they were driving to go tie it or win it. And Brady Cook threw a pick 6. That was a one-score game. And then the Georgia game, they played Georgia just as well as anyone this year in Athens. Missouri, impressive club this year. Tennessee, 7-3, 3-3 with Georgia coming to town this weekend and finishing up with Vanderbilt at home as well. Worst game of the year for Tennessee, complete no-shows, especially on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They've both gone backwards as the years progress. A loss this weekend to Georgia, and it's looking like an 8-4 finish for Tennessee. I think that's disappointing. This should have been a 9-3 team. Still could be if they beat Georgia. I think that game's going to be closer than people think. 8-4, you're going to be staring back, especially that Florida loss early in the year and being like, what the hell? You thought you should have went and competed better this past weekend in Columbia. But again, Missouri just, man, very impressive. Ultimately just dominating Tennessee, getting a 36-7 win. Did anybody see the little pissing matchup too between Eli Drinkwitz and Tennessee and Josh Heupel? Tennessee rolls out to kick a field goal, a relevant field goal with about a minute and a half left. Eli Drinkwitz calls a timeout to ice him. And then the quick handshake after the game. Both guys, Josh Heupel and Eli Drinkwitz, not too fond of each other, but that was interesting. But again, Missouri just ultimately really impressive. Moving on, we're going to Baton Rouge. LSU outscores Florida 52-35. How about Jaden Daniels with just an all-time performance? Where we weren't even sure he was going to play this past week after suffering the concussion in Tuscaloosa a week ago. But for the night, 372 yards and 3 touchdowns, and rushed for an additional 234 yards and 2 scores. I mean, he collected over 600 yards himself. You're one of the best individual performances in college football history that no one probably ever really saw because it was on the SEC network. And then added LSU's out of the playoff contention. I mean, Daniels became the only player in FBS history to throw for 350 yards and run for 200 in the same game. Let that sink in. 350 yards he threw for, and he ran for 200 after what he did against Alabama the week before. That's unbelievable. He was so good on Saturday with the ball in his hands, but he did have some throws off the mark. I mean, he's 17 of 26 tonight, but all in all, 606 yards, 5 touchdowns. What a night. Just give him the Heisman. I mean, I think ultimately the Heisman is going to come down to who wins the Pac-12 championship game between Michael Penix and most likely Bo Nix, unless Oregon State has something to say with it. I don't think that's being talked about enough. But let's just say between Oregon and Washington, I don't care how many losses Jaden Daniels had. Do what you did with Tim Tebow back in 2007. Florida had 3 losses. He put up video game numbers that year. Why can't we do the same for Jaden Daniels? But flipping to the other side, the side of the ball, it struggled all year for LSU. The defense, not that great. Gave up 488 yards. They weren't the worst defense in the stadium on Saturday night. They were not the worst defense in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night. The Gator offense gave up 701 total yards of offense. 701. That's horrendous. The Florida defense is now giving up 39 points or more in 4 straight games. Just a poor tackling team. They don't communicate on the back end, take poor angles in the flats. I was stressing about it. I was screaming at the top of my lungs on social media. Florida cannot tackle in space going into the Georgia game that week. They keep proving it. 39 or more points for 4 straight games. Austin Armstrong got started off hot. It's not really his scheme. You have to adjust to the simple stuff, man. Taking the correct angles and getting ball carriers to the ground is what Florida needs to work on. It's the simple things. I mean, dating back to mid-September matchup against Tennessee, the Florida defense has surrendered at least 380 yards of total offense to every opponent other than Charlotte and Vandy. Over the last 4 games, the Gators have given up 465 yards, 486 yards, 481, and 701 against South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, and LSU. I mean, that's awful. They're averaging 43.3 yards per game they're giving up in the last 4. Can't happen. Where do we go from here? Florida, 5-5, 3-5 with a trip to Mizzou this week, and they get Florida State at home. They got to have one of them. I probably feel better about the Florida State one. I don't trust them going up to Missouri and Como where it's going to be freezing. Florida guys don't like to play in the cold, guys. They just don't. They don't traditionally go have success in playing cold weather environments. They just don't. They're just not used to it. I don't know if Florida gets bowl eligible. I think that Florida State game, though, is going to be tougher for Florida State at home, especially when Florida's fighting for the bowl life, and it would be Florida's dream to ruin Florida State's season because a one-loss ACC champ's not getting in. So I think that's Florida's best shot to get Florida State next week. I don't see them beat Mizzou in Missouri. I just don't see it. LSU 7-3, 5-2 gets Georgia State at home this weekend before hosting Texas A&M for breakfast, it looks like. Remember, that's an 11 a.m. kick on Thanksgiving weekend. That Saturday morning. That should be a night game. What are we doing? A&M, but I guess firing Jimbo, LSU's out of the playoff contention. I guess they wanted to go Florida State that night, and then I think with Kentucky, Louisville, with Kentucky being pretty good as well. But LSU, Jaden Daniels, he's the big one to take away from this. Just give him the Heisman already. But LSU getting the 52-35 win over their rival Florida. Auburn, probably one of the bigger surprises in college football that no one talked about, and especially in the league, just dismantling Arkansas 48-10 in Fayetteville. Did not expect this one. I thought Arkansas would win the game. I thought Auburn could win, but to win like that right out of the gate, no way. No way did I think that. What a complete game by this Auburn team. Now, Arkansas could be completely out of gas. They looked like it. And Sam Pittman could be receiving his pink slip soon as well. But nonetheless, a very complete game for Hugh Freeze and his team. Everyone is going to see the 48 points and think the offense, while it did play well, had their best day of the year. How about the defense? There were some good choices, but Jalen McLeod was fantastic in this game as an edge rusher. And I said Auburn needed to start getting more pressure on the quarterback with just rushing forward. They struggled with that most of the year. But most of his damage came in the first half. McLeod's 9 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, dominant performance. He racked up 20 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, and 5 sacks in the last 4 games. Jalen McLeod's been playing really well. The App State transfer held Arkansas to 1 for 12 on third down. That's not going to win many games. Auburn is only giving up just 7 third down conversions in their last 48 opportunities last 4 games. That's very impressive. I'm fired up. I'm interested to see how they hold up against Alabama in 2 weeks from a defensive standpoint. Auburn's defense, they played well. They just get worn down a lot against good teams in the second half. Will they in 2 weeks? We'll see, but they're playing really well. 7 third down conversions. They've only given that up in their last 48 third down opportunities. That's awesome. But and they forced a turnover 19 straight games. Auburn's getting the rock out. Very much improved unit. Offensively, obviously, you got to be fired up. You put 48 points, converted on all 7 red zone appearances. I mean, I don't know what else to say about Auburn. That's one of the more complete Auburn games I've seen, not just for Hugh Freeze, but in a long time. Let's go to the negative side. For Arkansas, I don't know what to say. I mean, you just looked totally out of gas. I thought you'd build off momentum off the Florida win, but you didn't. This is just a performance that just cranks the heat up. Just might as well turn it up. It's only 54 degrees outside. You're going to be cranking your heat up. That's what's happening in Sam Pittman's house right now. Just cranking it up. You can't lose 48-10 at home to Auburn in Hugh Freeze's first year. If you just lose, people may accept it. How you lose, that's tough. Where do we go from here? I just don't really have a lot to say about Arkansas. I was just very discouraging. I mean, I listened to Sam Pittman's press conference today, and he couldn't say a lot. I mean, he kept saying like we didn't gather a lot of positives from Saturday's film, and I don't blame the dude. But where do they go from here? Arkansas 3-7, 1-6 with games against FIU and Missouri at home left. Remember, they play Missouri on Friday. The best thing goes 5-7, 3-6. We'll see. It looks like they're probably going to keep Sam Pittman, though, because I don't think they're going to be able to get the guy they want, which I think you should give Sam Pittman another year. Let him go hire an offensive coordinator, because I think he did well. I mean, take out this game against his alma mater this past week. But Travis Williams for the year has done pretty well for Arkansas. So he went 1 for 2 in big all-in coordinator hires. Let him go hire another offensive coordinator. Give Sam Pittman one more year. Auburn, 6-4, 3-4 with New Mexico State and Alabama both at home left. Auburn should have – New Mexico State's a little sleepy. They should be 7-4 rolling into the Alabama game with a chance to get to 8. With that defense, the way they force turnovers, Alabama's a bit of a house of horrors at Jordan-Hare. Alabama's the better team, but Auburn's giving themselves to have some momentum rolling into that game, winning what? It'll be 4 straight. Place going to be rocking at Jordan-Hare for Alabama that weekend. But Auburn just dismantling, getting the 48-10 win over Arkansas. Very impressive. Very complete game for Auburn. One of the more impressive Auburn games in the last 5 years, to be completely honest with you. But didn't get a chance to go back and watch these 2 games dealing with those coaching hires, but South Carolina got a needed 47-6 win over Vanderbilt. I'm going to pull up the box score for you. Just a total domination again. Remember, all 7 of these SEC matchups were double-digit games. I mean, South Carolina here, 50% on third down, total yards 487, only gave up 234. Spencer Rattler did his thing, 28 for 36, 351, 3 touchdowns. Ken Seals for Vanderbilt, 13 for 28, 104 yards, just not going to get it done. They brought in the Walter Taylor kid. He led them in rushing. I mean, Vanderbilt, where do they go from here? I think he's going to make a lot of coaching changes, especially at his coordinator positions. But this is what South Carolina needed. They got to win out. They got to beat Kentucky at home this week, then beat Clemson at home. It's at home, both games. They got an opportunity. But they needed a game like this to go feel good about themselves rolling into those last 2. If I'm Shane Beamer, I'm fired up about it. Vanderbilt, as you can see, kept forcing those turnovers. They got 1. Had 2 of their own. What they do on third down? 6 for 16. I mean, just South Carolina on personnel is better than Vanderbilt right now. Vanderbilt's struggling. They're reeling. But more so for South Carolina, you got to feel pretty decent about them right now. Yeah, I feel like you may build that into something. Shane Beamer usually sneaks up on one here, but where do you go from here? I mean, South Carolina, like I mentioned, 4-6, 2-5 in conference. Has Kentucky at home this week, Clemson at home this week. They could win both. It's not out of the realm. I don't see it, though. I don't see it, but you got a good start building off the 47-6 win over Vanderbilt. For Vanderbilt, you're heading into a bye week, 2-9, 0-7 in conference before a trip to Knoxville where you're probably not going to win in Neyland Stadium. It's going to be a big offseason for Clark Lee. He's not going to get fired, but big coordinator changes, big coordinator decisions coming up. You got to retain your best players. You need some help from an NIL standpoint. But again, South Carolina getting a big 47-6 win. Texas A&M getting another massive win against Mississippi State, finishing off the Bulldogs 51-10. The biggest deal in this game was both coaches that participated in this game on Saturday night, both no longer employed at those universities. I mean, give Jalen Henderson credit. The Fresno State quarterback had to play 11 for 19, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. Rushing, he had 12 carries for 60 yards, 2 touchdowns. He really shined. I mean, Chris Phillips, Got the start from Mississippi State at quarterback. Mike Wright came in. They still can't figure that out. But A&M, just total domination here. You see it. 396 total yards, 24 first downs to 12 first downs, just doubled their first downs. Mississippi State 3 for 13, not going to get it done. 4 turnovers. You can start hanging up the fat lady. Again, this will be one of the more interesting games to go down in SEC history, but A&M getting a 51-10 win over Mississippi State. I didn't think many people really wanted to go break down this game just because the bigger story here is both teams currently have no coach. They both have 2 games left. Texas A&M rolling into this one 6-4, 4-3. They have Abilene Christian at home this week and then go to LSU. If they were to get 2 or win, I mean, that'd be incredible for Elijah Robinson, who I really love to death. Great dude, defensive line coach when I was there. He's the interim head coach. Somebody's going to try to keep him. He gets offers all the time to be the defensive line coach. Played at Penn State. They try to get him to come back each year. Whoever gets that job at Texas A&M needs to retain him. Mississippi State 4-6, 1-6 in conference. Have to win out to get to a bowl game for Greg Knox. It's his second time to be an interim coach after Dan Mullen left. He took over. They get Southern Miss at home this week and then Ole Miss at home on Thanksgiving night. Got to win both. Don't see them getting both. So they're only 14-point favorites against Southern Miss this week. And Southern Miss could be rolling in with some momentum after the Lafayette win last week. I mean, they got a lot more to play for than Mississippi State does. But that's wrapping up all 7 matchups, all by double digits, rolling through here for you. Just circling back again. We got the Alabama getting the 49-21 win over Kentucky. Georgia getting the 52-17 dominating win over Ole Miss. Just a lot of Jimmies, not a lot of Joes on one side. Then you got Missouri getting the 36-7 win over Tennessee. LSU outscoring Florida 52-35. Auburn playing their best game in the last 5 years, building some momentum heading into that Iron Bowl. And again, it's against bad teams, but again, 48-10 over anybody, especially in someone else's home turf, is impressive. 48-10 win over Arkansas, really cranking up the hot seat on Sam Pittman. Then South Carolina getting a much-needed 47-6 win over Vanderbilt to build some momentum going to the last 2. And then Texas A&M, Mississippi State, pretty irrelevant game, 51-10 win. Texas A&M, both coaches fired. Jimbo that night, Zach Arnett this Monday morning. Week 12 power rankings. Where are we going from here, guys? The Week 12 power rankings. Let me pull it up. Here we go. We got 3 left, but rolling for it right now. The SEC championship matchup. Georgia comes in at 1 for me. Bama at 2. Missouri at 3. I think those are all 3 non-negotiables. Ole Miss at 4 with their head-to-head over LSU. LSU at 5. Now I think there's some separation right there. Then throw in Tennessee at 6. They have the head-to-head over Texas A&M. A&M just fired their coach, but still in the top half of the league, coming in at 7th. Kentucky coming in at 8th. Not totally a hater of Kentucky, but they've lost 4 of their last 5. They get the nod over Florida at 9 just because of the head-to-head and Florida's defense. Good gracious. Got to get better. Auburn moving up the charts, man. Won 4 straight. Really could be winning 4 straight because they had the 4 straight of who? Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, New Mexico State. They win this week. It's 4 straight heading to the Iron Bowl. They'd be 7-4 trying to get 8. They come in at 10th. South Carolina, again, good win, coming in at 11th. Pretty similar place. Arkansas had a chance to move up, but getting embarrassed at home against Auburn. I mean, Arkansas hadn't won at home since what? Week 2? Whew. It's rough. Remember, they were gone for 5 weeks, but they come in at 12th. Mississippi State at 13th. And then Vanderbilt coming in at 14th. We only got 3 more of these power rankings. They should be pretty set after these, really, in the next 2 weeks. And I'll give a final one here in the next 3 weeks. But that is the Week 12 SEC power rankings. I really don't think there's a lot of argument in this one. You can see in the comments, not a lot of them. I usually get a lot of flack if people don't like it. But again, I don't really know how you could argue with this one, honestly. Moving on. Little college basketball. Let me pull up the schedule again. It's my favorite time of the year. Next week, we will be having feast week. Now, I will have a newborn as well. I will have a kid at some point between a week from tonight until potentially this moment. My wife's water could have just broke down there on us, guys. But, again, besides me having a kid, this is the best time in college athletics, in my opinion. You have rivalry week and you have feast week of these college basketball tournaments. It is fun, good stuff. Friday, we had a lot of good action. We reviewed the early week's action on Thursday's episode, but just reviewing Vanderbilt picking themselves up after the Presbyterian loss, beating South Carolina upstate 74-67. They were down a little bit, but a much-needed win for Jerry Stackhouse. Kentucky getting the 81-61 20-point win over Texas A&M Commerce. Texas A&M Commerce played two SEC teams open up against Texas A&M and Kentucky. I'm worried about Kentucky's defense. I think they're really going to struggle against Kansas tomorrow. We'll talk about that one, but here in just a moment. But I'm just not really fired up about Kentucky's defense. I think Cal knows that. It will be interesting to see that one. Georgia getting a 3-point win over a solid Wake Forest team with Steve Forbes. Remember, Wake Forest beat Alabama in a scrimmage. It's just a scrimmage, but still, it's a big home win. Splitting those first two against Oregon and Wake Forest for Georgia. Nice win for Mike White. A&M getting a tough win against a solid Ohio State team in Columbus, Ohio. A&M with 4 returning starters getting the 73-66 win. Impressed. I mean, A&M didn't even shoot that well, but again, they get to the free throw line a ton and play good defense. Good win for Texas A&M. That's their first. That's one more quad one win than they got last year in non-conference. So they already surpassed it. Florida dropping one late in Charlotte to Virginia, 73-70. This game came down to the wire. I still like Florida to get into the tournament. I like what I see with Riley Kugel. Once they start shooting better, once Walter Clayton moves in that 2 spot, when Zion Pullen comes back and plays the 1 guard spot, I think they'll be better. But again, Virginia, good club. Florida could have won this without their starting point guard. Arkansas getting the 86-68 win over Gardner-Webb. Arkansas, I think one of the more complete teams, a true national title contender. Tremont Mark, L. Ellis, Devo Davis has improved as a shooter. Khalif Battle, the Temple transfer. They're deep, man. They're deep. And my preseason player of the year, Trevon Brazile. I like Arkansas. They're playing right now. I'll get you that score in a minute. Ole Miss, they're going to struggle just without getting Brandon Murray and Musa Cisse. Musa Cisse, more of a defensive player, former Big 12 defensive player of the year. Still struggled a little bit against Eastern Washington in their first game against Alabama State. Where's Ole Miss's offense going to come from? That's my big question, but they get the 11-point win. Alabama, 102-80. Alabama, again, going for over 100 points. This is maybe Alabama, Nate Oates' most versatile offense they've had. Grant Nelson, Aaron Estrada, Mark Sears, a 3-headed monster. Defense will be key. They need more out of guys like Nick Pringle, Muhammad McGee's going to have to be a rim protector. They really miss Charles Bediako. But Indiana State, the Fighting Larry Birds could be a tournament team. Speaking of not making the tournament here for a minute, LSU losing at home by 2 to Nicholls State on a last second shot, really, with about 2 seconds left. Nicholls hit a 3 to take a 2-point. That's a tough loss for Matt McMahon. Woo! They got a big one this week in a tournament. I believe in Charleston against Dayton open up. They're going to need to do well in that tournament. Matt McMahon could be on the hot seat because LSU's other sports are so good, and he's kind of the outlier. Auburn getting an 86-71 win over Southeastern. Didn't get a big opportunity to watch a lot of that, but I was impressed with Auburn against Baylor earlier last week. Memphis just taking Missouri to the woodshed after getting down by 10 early. Missouri came out firing, was up 12. But Javon Quinterly, the Alabama point guard transfer at Memphis, kind of took over in the second half to kind of reel off a 50-point win. I just don't know where Missouri gets a bunch of offense. I don't think it's Caleb Grill, Noah Carter, Nick Honor. I don't think it's that guy. I don't. So where does that come from? That's a big question to me. And then Tennessee, I think they're one of the better teams in the country. Maybe the best team I've seen in the country so far. Outside of maybe Arizona and Duke, Tennessee, man, getting the 10-point, 80-70 win at Wisconsin, the Kohl Center. Tough, gritty win. Tennessee's so deep. I mean, Jordan Gainey, the USC upstate kid coming off the bench. Man, they do a phenomenal job. Rick Barnes has done a really good job building this roster. Dalton Connect, the Northern Colorado transfer, just a true scorer. Throwing Toby Awaka, Jonas Adu's fitting into the role there. You still got Santiago Vescovi getting his feet wet back in it. Zakai Ziegler coming off the bench with the ACL tear. Tennessee's the best team in the country, I think, right now, in my opinion. Them or Arizona. But a great road win, 10-point double-digit road win at Wisconsin. A lot of people don't go have success there. But great win for Rick Barnes. And then South Carolina getting a 2-point win over Virginia Tech. It's a big win for Lamont Paris and them in Charlotte as well. Then moving to Saturday's quick action, just wanted to show you the score there. Mississippi State getting the 87-63 win over UT Martin. And then Georgia had to bounce back after the Wake Forest win, and they got a 10-point win, 2 games in 3 days over North Carolina Central. We got some action going on right now for you. What do we got right now? We got South Carolina up 10 over VMI. It was the final, 74-64, while we were having the episode over the Virginia Military Institute. South Carolina getting the win. Missouri up 10 right now, 41-31 over Southern Illinois. Or who is that? SIU Edwardsville? Who the hell scheduled that? It's an interesting schedule there, but they're up 10. And then Arkansas looks like they're up 6 right now, 42-36, starting the second half against Old Dominion. So that'll be interesting. That's where we stand right now. And to preview tomorrow's action, just Wofford at Tennessee. Tennessee's last real test where they go to an incredible Maui. They open up with Syracuse. They'll get the winner of Gonzaga, Purdue in the second round. You can finish third or fourth in Maui this year, and you're a legit Final Four team. This is their last warm-up before heading to Maui. I don't think they're going to Maui. They're going to Honolulu, I think. They're moving Maui just due to the fires. Florida A&M at Florida. Florida should handle business before facing Florida State later in the week. We'll preview that on Thursday. North Alabama heading to Mississippi State. Mississippi State should handle that. I like Mississippi State this year. And this is without Tolu Smith. The offense is coming around. With the Tyler Hubbard kid, the true freshman from Jackson. The Andrew Miller kid, the transfer from Marshall, looks really good. The Fort kid looks really good. They just got more scoring opportunities on offense. UNC Greensboro at Vanderbilt. Interesting game here. This could be a sneaky one. I'm telling you, Jerry Stackhouse does not need to lose this game. UNC Greensboro, they got the two twins at guards that can cause hell for Vanderbilt. I'm telling you, this is a sneaky game to keep an eye on. Vanderbilt needs this. Detroit Mercy at Ole Miss. Ole Miss should handle this. South Alabama at Alabama. Richie Grant and his team lost to Mobile to open up the season. This Alabama should have 2 games they get through before they head to that Destin tournament to open up with Ohio State, who A&M beat on Friday. But that'll be a good test for Alabama. Texas A&M heads to SMU. SMU brought in a bunch of transfers. They should be better, but they're still filling it out, playing together. A&M, they're a good team. High floor team. You know what you're going to get with them. They should handle business in Dallas. Then the big one, the Champions Classic, the second of 2 games in Chicago tomorrow. Kansas at Kentucky. I just don't know how Kentucky's going to defend without 3 of their 7-footers. I mean, Bradshaw's out, Big Z's out, and then Kansas has Hunter Dickinson, the Michigan transfer. Again, going back and watching Kentucky play the other day, they don't defend well because they're a bunch of true freshmen. I mean, DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, those guys aren't communicating when to switch, when not to switch. I think Kansas is going to take advantage of it. They got DeJuan Harris back. I just think there's a lot more mismatches for Kansas to take advantage of, especially this early in the season. And I think Cal knows that. They got to improve their defense, and I think he's a little concerned about that because I think he was pissed off today in his press conference. Big Z, the Spaniard, couldn't get eligible. So I expect Kansas to win this one tomorrow. I really do. But moving on, there's no Wednesday night matchups, and we'll preview the Thursday night ones on Thursday show. So, yep, that's just the week right there in college basketball. And then my power rankings, where we get you out of here. The first power rankings in basketball. Let me roll through it for you before we get you out of here. Let me get out of that. Yep, here we go. The first of many to come. Heading at number 1, like I mentioned, Tennessee, very deep team. They addressed a lot of their offensive needs with Dalton Knecht and Jordan Gainey off the bench. Marissa Kaiser still coming back from a knee injury. Tennessee's a legit national title contender. Right underneath them, like I said, Arkansas coming in at number 2, added a lot of offensive depth with Temple transfers, Khalif Battle, Tremont Mark coming over from Houston, L. Ellis from Louisville, adding Trevon Brazile, who got injured last year. Arkansas is a very good deep team. Texas A&M, not high on the ceiling, but I like the floor. You know what you're going to get with them. Not a pretty offensive team. I think they only shot 20% from 3 in their road win the other day against Ohio State. Not seeing a whole lot, but they're always going to defend, and they're going to get to the free throw line, and that travels. I like the Aggies at 3. Alabama sitting at 4. I think they're going to be able to score with the best. But right now, you're probably having to ask against good teams to go score 85+ because they're not defending that well. They're giving up drive-by layups, not defending the rim. Nate Oates is challenging his team to do that. That is going to be the key. Alabama's always going to put up points. This could be their most versatile offense they've had with the 3-headed monster. But if Alabama's a legit Final Four team, the defense is going to have to improve. They're coming at 4. 5, Auburn. They're going to need a big non-conference win coming up. I don't think they'll get it this week against Notre Dame. I think they'll beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame is no good. I forget who they lost to earlier this past weekend. Auburn kind of let Baylor get one off the hook. They were up 5 with 3 minutes left, and Auburn lost the game. That would have been a big one. But Auburn coming at 5. I think they have one of the deeper front courts with Janai Broome, Jalen Williams, and Dylan Cardwell in the SEC. Aiden Holloway looks fine to guard. Auburn's going to be a good team, tournament team. Mississippi State, they're deeper too. Similar to Tennessee, addressed a lot of their offensive needs. They're going to rebound. They're going to play a little old school. They're going to play physical. They're long. They carry a lot of mass. Mississippi State's going to be a tournament team as well. Some people may be shocked I got Kentucky sitting here at 7th. Until Kentucky starts defending well and not playing up palms up defense, like I say when we're talking about football a lot, I think they're going to get exposed tomorrow against Kansas in Chicago. I really don't think they do. I think Dickinson's going to be a matchup nightmare for them until they get some guys back in the front court and start getting used to playing with each other and communicating on those screens at the top of the key. Florida coming in at 8. I'm impressed with Florida. I think once they get guys, once Zion Pullen comes back from it being eligible, move Walter Clayton, the Iona transfer, to the 2 guard instead of being the 1. He's not a point guard. They're going to start shooting well. Add in Riley Cougar. They're going to be Kugel. They'll be fine. Number 9, Georgia. Splitting against Oregon and Wake Forest, 2 solid clubs, was big last week. They'll have a chance to go to a tournament, do well. That will be interesting for Georgia this week. They got a big opportunity. To go do some damage. What is it? The Thanksgiving? Is it the Thanksgiving tournament? When's Georgia? Let me see. Georgia basketball schedule. They got a big tournament coming up here in just a minute. They got an opportunity to go win some basketball. They got Miami on the 17th. It's a big one. Miami's a former Final Four team, beat UCF this past week. That could be a big opportunity for Georgia there. They could go 2-1 out of the Oregon, Wake Forest, and Miami matchups. That'd be impressive. And then pull that up. We're sharing it. Number 10, Missouri. I just worry about where the offense is going to come from. Losing Kobe Brown, which makes sense. Went to the NBA draft, had a good combine, got drafted. You don't blame him, but I don't trust Sean East consistently scoring points. Nick Honor, Noah Carter, Caleb Grill. I just don't know how they're going to score consistently to keep up with some of these better teams. Ole Miss, they had Brandon Murray and Musa Cisse. I think this could be a bubble tournament team. Again, I don't know how they're going to score a lot of points. South Carolina, it's one of those Lamont Paris things. I'm not going to believe it until I see it. It's only a second year. They're improved, but how improved? Vanderbilt. An interesting one this week against UNC Greensboro. They cannot drop another one. They already lost to the Blue Hose, who were coming in off 18 straight losses. Be a rough start for Jerry Stackhouse. And then LSU. Matt McMahon coming off a loss to Nicholls State at home. Can't happen. I predicted LSU to finish last in the league. I still think it's going to happen. Don't really like this team. Outside of Will Baker, there's really not a lot of guys to be real fired up about. But this is the first week of my SEC basketball power rankings. Leave it up here for just a few seconds. But again, Tennessee coming at number 1, Arkansas number 2, Texas A&M number 3, Alabama number 4, Auburn number 5, Mississippi State number 6, Kentucky number 7, Florida number 8, Georgia number 9, Missouri number 10, Ole Miss number 11, South Carolina 12th, Vanderbilt 13th, and LSU off that Nicholls State loss at home coming in at 14th. But, man, I appreciate y'all joining me on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. We covered a lot. We had a Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports come on, senior college football analyst, come on and talk about the coaching changes in the SEC. Already Jimbo Fisher. We know A&M's open. Zach Arnett. Could Arkansas come open? Could Kentucky come open with Mark Stoops going to Iowa potentially? Who knows? We talked about it, what it meant. We reviewed all 7 matchups. It was just double-digit statement Saturday for a lot of teams in the SEC. Very impressed. We reviewed last week's SEC college basketball action, previewed this week's action, gave you some updated scores right now. South Carolina won earlier against Virginia Military Institute. And I gave you my first SEC basketball power rankings, as well as we gave the football power rankings as well. There's only 3 of those left, so take them as they come. But we did deliver the first SEC basketball power rankings tonight. Man, we covered a lot. That was fun. We don't have as many college football games to preview this week because there's only 3 conference matchups. But again, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. You have a fantastic night.